The sky above Jaku city split open with a sound like reality tearing at its seams. All for One had been experimenting in the shadows for months, testing a stolen quirk that could pierce dimensional barriers, searching for weapons, for power, for anything that might tip the scales when his grand plan reached its culmination. He hadn't expected to succeed. He certainly hadn't expected this. A figure emerged from the breach trailing ionized energy and cosmic debris, tumbling through the atmosphere at terminal velocity. Even disoriented, even in a universe whose very physics felt subtly wrong against his skin, Clark Kent's instincts took over. He arrested his fall 300 feet above the ground, hovering in unfamiliar air that tasted of quirk energy and industrial pollution, staring down at a city that was absolutely, unmistakably, not Metropolis. The breach sealed behind him with a thunderclap that shattered windows for 6 blocks. Below, civilians pointed upward with a mixture of awe and terror. Some pulled out phones, others ran. Clark's super hearing picked up 1,000 conversations at once. Panicked speculation about which hero this was, whether this was a villain attack, if the flying figure was a new type of Nomu. But what struck him most was the word that kept repeating over and over, whispered and shouted and broadcast across the city's emergency channels. Quirk. Unknown aerial contact. A voice crackled through what sounded like a police scanner. Possible high-tier flight Quirk user. Hero Commission has been notified. All units maintain distance until classification. Clark's X-ray vision swept the city automatically, cataloging threats, searching for context. What he saw made his blood run cold. This wasn't just a different city. This was a different world. The architecture, the technology, the way people moved, everything spoke to a civilization that had evolved along a completely different path. And everywhere he looked, he saw people using powers, casually, openly, as naturally as breathing. A teenager with crystalline skin directing traffic. A woman with stretching arms helping someone retrieve a cat from a roof. A man whose hands crackled with electricity working on a power line without protective gear. This isn't Kansas, Clark muttered, then amended. This isn't even Earth. Not my Earth. A sonic boom shattered his analysis. Clark turned to find himself facing a man in a hero costume that incorporated feathers into its design. Massive red wings spread wide, our golden eyes sharp with assessment. The newcomer, the hero, carried himself with the trained wariness of someone who'd fought too many battles, seen too many threats. Hawk's number 2 hero, the man announced, keeping a careful 30 feet of distance. His voice was professionally friendly, but Clark could hear his elevated heart rate, see the micro-adjustments of his stance. You're going to need to come with me for Quirk registration and identification. Flying over a city without a license is illegal, even for someone with a powerful flight quirk like yours. I'm not, Clark started, then stopped. How did you explain that you weren't from this reality? That you didn't have a quirk, you were an alien powered by solar radiation, and that you'd been in the middle of stopping Lex Luthor and suddenly found yourself pulled through space and time? Hawks' wings rustled, feathers separating slightly. A threat display, Clark realized. Or preparation for attack. Not what? Not going to comply. Listen, I get it. Strong quirk. Probably used to doing your own thing, but Hero Society has rules for a reason, especially now. His expression darkened. We're on the edge of war. Unregistered, unknown power users are a security risk. So I'm asking nicely, once, come with me to the commission for evaluation. Before Clark could respond, his super hearing picked up something that made his heart sink. 15 blocks east, a building was collapsing. Structural failure, maybe from the shockwave of his arrival. And inside, his hearing focused, filtering through concrete and steel. A classroom on children. A teacher screaming for everyone to get under their desks. We don't have time for this, Clark said, and moved. To Hawks, the stranger simply vanished. One moment there, the next gone, leaving only displaced air and the fading echo of another sonic boom. Hawks's feathers exploded outward in tracking formation, his mind racing. That speed, that was beyond any flight quirk he'd documented. That was... The stranger reappeared 15 blocks away, visible on Hawks's feather-transmitted visual feed. He'd torn through the wall of the collapsing building. No, not torn, carefully penetrated while somehow supporting the structure above. Hawks watched in disbelief as the figure emerged, carrying 23 children and their teacher, all wrapped gently in what looked like a makeshift harness created from his own red cape. As the building finished collapsing behind him, not a single injury. By the time Hawks reached the scene, the stranger was setting down the last child, accepting stammering thanks from the teacher. The kids stared up at him with undisguised wonder. "That was so cool," a girl with horns shouted. "What's your hero name? What's your ranking?" "Are you stronger than All Might was?" a boy asked. "Can you teach me to fly like that?" another chimed in. Clark knelt down to their level, and Hawks saw something in the stranger's expression that made him reconsider his initial assessment. Not a villain, not a threat, someone genuinely, deeply relieved that everyone was safe. "I'm just someone who wanted to help," Clark said simply. "And yes, I'll teach anyone who wants to learn if I can." Hawks landed beside them, and his professional wariness warring with reluctant respect. The stranger had moved faster than Hawks could track, had demolished a wall and supported a collapsing building simultaneously, and hadn't even seemed winded. That level of power. "Hero Commission wants you," Hawks said, more gently this time. "And after that display, so will every villain organization in Japan. You just announced yourself to everyone with working eyes and a news feed." He gestured to the dozens of phones recording. "So here's some free advice from the number 2. You're going to need allies. Fast." Clark straightened, towering over Hawks by a solid 4 inches, his cape settling around his shoulders. For the first time, Hawks got a clear look at the symbol on his chest, an S in a diamond, rendered in red and gold. Not a symbol he recognized from any hero agency. "Now, I appreciate the warning," Clark said, "but I'm not from around here. I don't know your laws, your hero rankings, or your commission. What I do know is that people needed help, and I helped them. Where I come from, that's enough." "Well, this isn't where you come from," Hawks replied, pulling out his phone. "And in hero society, good intentions without proper authorization can get you arrested as a vigilante. Or worse, if the wrong people decide you're a threat." He started typing rapidly. "I'm calling UA. If anyone can handle this mess, it's..." "Hawks!" The voice crackled through his earpiece, urgent and commanding. It was the Hero Commission's emergency channel. "We've detected massive Quirk energy signatures at the Jaku City Hospital location. It's happening. Shigaraki Tomura is awakening. All heroes, code black. No, this is not a drill." The color drained from Hawks's face. Clark didn't need super hearing to catch the message. The sheer horror in the hero's expression told him everything. "The war," Hawks whispered. "It's starting." If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Plus, Ultra. Clark's jaw tightened. He didn't know who Shigaraki Tomura was. He didn't understand what code black meant in this society's terminology. But he recognized the look on Hawks's face. He'd seen it on Batman's, on Wonder Woman's, on his own reflection when facing threats that could end civilizations. "Then I guess we'd better stop it," Clark said. And somewhere in the depths of Tartarus prison, All for One smiled. And his experiment had succeeded beyond his wildest expectations. The dimensional breach had brought him something unprecedented, something that defied this world's rules entirely, something he very much intended to possess, UA High School's emergency command center had transformed into controlled chaos within minutes of the code black alert. Dozens of pro-heroes crowded around holographic displays showing real-time feeds from Jaku City, their faces grim as they watched their worst-case scenario unfold. Principal Nezu stood at the center, his impossibly intelligent eyes processing data faster than any computer, coordinating the response to Shigaraki's awakening. But a significant portion of the room's attention had diverted to a secondary screen showing footage of an unknown figure moving at impossible speeds, demolishing walls bare-handed and carrying 23 people like they weighed nothing. "Rewind that," Endeavor commanded, his flames flickering with barely contained tension. "Show me the moment he breaches the building." The footage played again. Frame by frame, they watched the stranger accelerate from hovering to supersonic in less than a second, saw him tear through reinforced concrete, watched him support tons of collapsing infrastructure with one hand while gathering civilians with the other. "That's not a quirk," Edgeshot said quietly. "Or if it is, it's beyond any classification I've ever seen." "Everything's a quirk," Mirko countered, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. "Mutation type, maybe. Like All Might's power, stockpiling, but even more. All Might couldn't fly," Best Genist interrupted, his fiber-manipulated voice precise. "And his strength required build-up, required One-for-All's accumulated power. This individual went from 0 to full power instantaneously." In the back of the room, Izuku Midoriya stood with his classmates from 1A, to his analytical mind racing through possibilities. His notebook was already open, green lightning crackling unconsciously around his fingers as One-for-All responded to his excitement and confusion. "Multiple quirks," Deku muttered, scribbling frantically. "Flight, super strength, super speed, heat vision maybe, but that's like having 5 S-tier quirks active simultaneously without any visible drawback. Even All for One couldn't—" "Could what, young Midoriya?" All Might's voice made everyone turn. The retired symbol of peace stood in the doorway, skeletal form somehow still commanding presence. "Couldn't maintain that many high-level quirks at once without significant physical strain? You're correct, even my predecessor, who faced All for One multiple times. Eine confirmed that the symbol of evil had limits to simultaneous quirk usage. Unless," Todoroki said, his heterochromatic eyes fixed on the screen, "it's not multiple quirks. What if it's one quirk that mimics all of those abilities? A transformation type that restructures the user's biology into something else?" "Alien," Bakugo spat, but there was curiosity beneath his aggression. "That's what you're dancing around saying. Dude looks human but moves like some kind of alien bullshit." The room went silent. Because as absurd as it sounded, it was the explanation that fit best. Nezu's paws clicked against the keyboard, pulling up analysis from multiple hero agencies. The Hero Commission has designated this individual code name, Unknowness, for the symbol on his costume. Hawks is currently escorting him to UA under pretense of protection, but Commission President has already issued 3 separate contingency orders ranging from recruitment to neutralization. Neutralization? Aizawa's voice cut through the room, sharp with disapproval. For someone who saved 23 civilians, for someone who represents an unknown variable during our most critical operation in decades, Nezu replied, his tone sympathetic but pragmatic. The Commission sees 3 possibilities. He's a savior-class hero we desperately need, a potential asset for the villains if they recruit him first, or a threat too powerful to exist outside their control. Given the timing of his appearance, simultaneous with Shigaraki's awakening, they're not inclined toward trust. "How convenient," Aizawa muttered. "Another potential weapon for them to point where they choose." All Might moved closer to the screen, his sunken eyes studying the stranger's face. Something about the expression, the genuine relief when the civilians were safe, the way he knelt to speak with children despite his obvious power, struck a chord deep in Toshinori Yagi's memory. "I want to meet him," All Might said. "Before the Commission sinks their claws in, before we make assumptions about threat or asset. I want to speak with him, hero to whatever he is." "That's already being arranged," Nezu confirmed. "Hawks is bringing him directly to UA under the guise of protective custody. They should arrive within..." The window exploded inward. No, not exploded. Opened. By someone who'd flown through it at controlled speed. Hawks clutching his shoulders with wings spread for stability, both of them touching down in the center of the command room with perfect precision. Every hero in the room activated their quirk instantly. Flames, ice, fiber manipulation, hardening, erasure. 24 different powers ready to unleash in the space of a heartbeat. Clark raised his hands slowly, palms out. "I'd really prefer not to fight anyone right now." "Stand down," Hawks shouted, though his own feathers remained in defensive formation. "He's here voluntarily. Mostly." Izawa's eyes glowed red, his hair floating as erasure activated, focused entirely on the stranger. Clark felt something. A pulling sensation like invisible hands trying to suppress the solar energy in his cells. It weakened him. 5, maybe 10%. Enough to notice, but not enough to matter. His powers flickered, but didn't fade. "Interesting," Izawa said, maintaining his quirk. "You're resisting erasure. That shouldn't be possible unless it's not a quirk," Clark finished quietly. "Which is what I've been trying to explain." He lowered his hands slowly, addressing the room. "My name is Clark Kent. I'm from a place called Earth, but not this Earth. Not this reality. I was pulled here by something, some kind of dimensional breach, and I don't know how to get back." The silence that followed was deafening. Bakugo broke it. "That's the dumbest villain origin story I've ever heard." "It's not a story," Clark replied, meeting the explosive teen's glare calmly. "And I'm not a villain. I'm someone who helps people. Where I come from, they call people like me heroes. Though apparently here, that word has different rules attached." Deku stepped forward, notebook clutched to his chest, green eyes wide with manic curiosity. "Other Earths? Like parallel dimensions?" "The theory has existed but never been proven. Quirk research into spatial manipulation suggested possibilities, but..." He stopped, realizing everyone was staring. "Sorry, but if he's telling the truth, this changes everything we know about Quirk science. If," Endeavor emphasized, "flames intensifying. A very large if." He turned to Nezu. "Principal, your assessment." The super-intelligent creature studied Clark with unblinking eyes. "He's either telling the truth and represents a paradigm shift in our understanding of reality, or he's lying and represents the most sophisticated infiltration attempt in history." Nezu's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. "Either way, I find him fascinating." "I can prove it," Clark said. "But not my origin. I don't know how to prove dimensional travel. But I can prove I'm not from this world. Your technology, your culture, even your biology operates on different principles than mine. Test me. Scan me. I'll submit to whatever you need." "The Commission won't allow that," Hawks interjected. "They want him locked in Tartarus until they decide what to do with him." "Tartarus?" Clark's eyes narrowed. "A prison? For saving people?" "For being an unknown element during a crisis," Nezu explained. "You must understand, Mr. Kent, your arrival coincides with the awakening of perhaps the most dangerous villain in our history. From the Commission's perspective, that timing is suspect." Clark's jaw tightened. This was the problem with power. People always feared it more than they trusted it. He'd faced this on his own Earth. He had spent years proving himself before the world accepted Superman. Now he was starting over in a reality that had no reason to believe him, every reason to fear him, and apparently its own apocalyptic crisis to deal with. Then let me help with your crisis, Clark offered. This Shigaraki you mentioned. Hawks said he's awakening, that it's war. Let me fight alongside your heroes. Let me prove myself through action. Absolutely not. All Might's voice carried the weight of authority. Even his weakened frame couldn't diminish. Young man, you don't understand what you're offering. Shigaraki Tomura isn't just a villain. He's being groomed as the successor to All for One, the greatest evil our society has ever known. His power can disintegrate anything he touches, and if the intelligence is correct, his awakening will make him unstoppable. Then you need all the help you can get, Clark replied simply. The two men, symbols from different worlds, stared at each other. All Might saw something in Clark's eyes that reminded him painfully of his younger self. That absolute, unshakable conviction that people could be saved, that heroes should never give up, that one person could make a difference. It was the conviction that had nearly killed him. The decision isn't ours to make, Endeavor said, though his flames had dimmed slightly. The Commission has final authority, and they've already sent their order. He looked at Hawks. They're classifying him as unknown threat level. Symbol. The word hung in the air like a curse. Hawks explained softly, it's the classification they created after All Might. It's for individuals whose power is so significant they could fundamentally alter society. There are protocols. I know the protocols, All Might interrupted, his voice bitter. I helped write them. After my retirement, the Commission made sure that no one would ever be allowed to become another symbol of peace without their explicit control. Clark understood immediately. This society had built itself around one man's strength, had let him shoulder the burden of their hope, and when he inevitably fell, they decided to never let it happen again. Not through inspiration or growth, but through control. I'm not interested in being anyone's symbol, Clark said firmly. I'm interested in helping people. If your commission has a problem with that, they can take it up with me personally. Mirko laughed, a sharp bark of approval. I like this guy. Sounds like someone who'd punch bureaucracy in the face. This isn't a joke, Best Jeanist said sharply. The Commission controls Hero Society. They issue licenses, approve rankings, investigate crimes. Operating without their approval doesn't make you a hero, Mr. Kent. It makes you a vigilante, and vigilantes are criminals. Then I guess, Clark said quietly, we have very different definitions of what makes a hero. Outside, sirens began to wail. Every phone in the room buzzed simultaneously. The holographic display flared red with a single message. Shigaraki Tomura awakened. Decay expanding. Jaku City, hospital zone, disintegrating. All heroes engage. The war arc had officially begun. And Superman, stranded in a world not his own, would have to decide whether to save a society that feared him, fight alongside heroes who doubted him, or stand aside and watch civilization crumble. The decision was made for him when the building shook. Not from an explosion, from absence. Clark's super hearing caught it first, a wave of molecular disintegration spreading outward from Jaku Hospital, turning matter into dust. Buildings, vehicles, people, all crumbling into particulate nothing. The screams cut off mid-breath as vocal cords ceased to exist. He was moving before conscious thought, shouldering past heroes toward the window. Izawa's erasure quirk had deactivated in the chaos, and Clark's powers surged back to full strength, or as full as this universe allowed. "Don't!" Endeavor shouted, flames erupting. "You don't understand what you're flying into." But Clark was already gone, a sonic boom rattling the windows as he accelerated toward Jaku City, at speeds that made sound seem stationary. In the skies above the hospital, so he saw it. A wave of decay spreading like a gray tsunami, turning everything it touched to powder. At the epicenter, floating above the disintegrating ruins, was a figure with pale blue hair and hands that promised death. Tomura Shigaraki, had awakened, and he was ending the world 5 fingers at a time. Clark didn't hesitate. He dove, using his heat vision to carve a trench ahead of the decay wave, creating a firebreak in the laws of physics. Simultaneously, his freeze breath supercooled the air, creating a barrier of temperature differential. It slowed the decay by precious seconds. Seconds he used to grab civilians. His speed became a blur of red and blue, yanking people out of death's path microseconds before disintegration claimed them. An elderly man, and a group of teenagers, a hero in a rabbit costume missing an arm, and still fighting despite massive injuries. Clark grabbed them all, depositing them miles away before returning for more. What? Shigaraki's voice was a rasp of confusion and rage. Red eyes focused on the flying figure that defied his decay, that saved those marked for death. You're not in my game. You're not supposed to exist. Clark ignored him, saving 3 more civilians, then 5, then a dozen. His X-ray vision mapped every living person in the decay zone. His super hearing tracked heartbeats. His speed made him omnipresent. And in Tartarus prison, all for one felt it. Through his connection with Shigaraki, through the quirks that linked master and successor, he perceived the alien presence. Power that wasn't quirk-based, strength that didn't follow this universe's rules. Energy that tasted of distant suns and impossible genetics. Ah, magnificent, All for One whispered in his cell, his ruined face splitting into a smile. The dimensional breach worked, and it brought me something unprecedented. His consciousness reached across the connection to Shigaraki, whispering instructions. That one, the flying man. I must have him, his power, his genetics. Bring him to me, Tomura. Break him. Let me taste what he is. Shigaraki's hand shot forward, decay racing toward Clark at point-blank range. Clark caught the hand. The entire battlefield froze. Heroes who'd been coordinating the attack stopped mid-motion. Villains paused their assault. Even Gigantomachia, the colossal beast rampaging toward his master, halted to witness the impossible. Decay Quirk met Kryptonian skin. The power that disintegrated all might's strength, that turned cities to dust, and that promised entropy to all matter. Stopped. Clark's hand didn't crumble, didn't powder, didn't even scratch. No, Shigaraki breathed. No, you should be dust. Everyone is dust. Everything is dust. He grabbed with his other hand. Both palms pressed against Clark's chest, 5 fingers each, full activation of a quirk that had leveled city blocks. Nothing happened. I don't know what you are, Clark said quietly, holding the villain's wrists, but you need to stop. Now, before more people die. I'm the ending, Shigaraki screamed, and this time, Clark felt it. Not decay of his cells, his Kryptonian biology resisted that, but decay of the air around him, the ground beneath them, reality itself seeming to fray at the edges. Shigaraki wasn't just destroying matter, he was destroying space of the quirk evolution. All for One had engineered was more terrifying than anyone had predicted. Clark released Shigaraki and flew backward, grabbing Endeavor and Mirko as the decay wave expanded spherically, consuming everything in a 50-meter radius. Buildings dissolved. The ground opened into a massive crater. Heroes scattered, their quirks suddenly inadequate against entropy incarnate. He's stronger than the reports, Endeavor gasped as Clark set him down. The intelligence said awakening would enhance his decay, but this is apocalyptic, Clark finished. His telescopic vision tracked Shigaraki, floating in the center of the expanding destruction. He's not just destroying, he's accelerating molecular breakdown. Given enough time, he'll disintegrate Japan, Mirko interrupted, blood streaming from a head wound. Then the world. That's the plan. That's always been AFO's plan. Clark's jaw tightened. This was beyond hero work. This was extinction prevention, and while these heroes were brave, skilled, determined, They were fighting with one hand tied behind their backs by Quirk limitations, by human fragility, by the simple fact that touching Shigaraki meant death. But Clark couldn't die from touch, couldn't be disintegrated. And right now, that made him the only one who could fight Shigaraki directly. "I'm going back in," Clark said. "That's suicide," Endeavor countered. "Even if he can't decay you, he's got dozens of other quirks from All for One. Air manipulation, strength enhancement, regeneration." "Then I'll handle those too," Clark replied. "Your job is to evacuate everyone in a 5-mile radius, and my job is to stop him from expanding that decay any further." Before they could argue, he was gone, flying straight into the gray wave of disintegration. All for One felt Superman's approach and smiled wider. The flying man was fast, strong, resistant to decay. But All for One had stolen thousands of quirks over 2 centuries. He had counters for everything. Through Shigaraki, he activated a quirk that manipulated air pressure, creating a vacuum around Superman. No air meant no sound, no medium for flight, hypothetically, no breath. Clark paused, feeling the atmosphere vanish, then continued flying. Kryptonians could hold their breath for hours, and flight wasn't air-based. It was gravitational manipulation at the molecular level. All for One smile faltered. "Interesting, not flight. Levitation. No, something else. His biology doesn't match any quirk profile." He tried the next counter. Quirks that generated electromagnetic pulses, radiation that scrambled nervous systems, gravitational intensifiers that should have crushed bone. Clark flew through them all, his Kryptonian physiology adapting, resisting, enduring. "What are you?" Shigaraki screamed, launching himself at Clark with all the enhanced strength and speed All for One had granted him. They collided mid-air, and the shockwave leveled 3 blocks. Heroes watching from the perimeter saw 2 figures grappling in the sky, one spreading decay and death, one shining with determination and solar energy. Every time Shigaraki's hands touched Superman, nothing happened. Every time Superman struck back, Shigaraki's enhanced durability kept him in the fight. It was the clash of systems, a quirk evolution versus alien biology. This world's most dangerous villain versus a hero from beyond reality. And in his cell, All for One realized something that filled him with both terror and ecstasy. "He can't be stolen from," All for One whispered. "His power isn't a quirk. It's his biology, his cells, his very existence." The implications crashed through his ancient mind. "I can't take what he is. I can only take him, his body, his genetics." All for One's consciousness dove deeper into Shigaraki, seizing more control, pushing his successor's body beyond its limits. If he couldn't steal Superman's power, he'd possess Superman's body. He'd abandon Shigaraki's decaying form and transfer his consciousness into this indestructible alien vessel. Shigaraki's fighting style changed instantly, became more tactical, more precise, stopped trying to decay and started trying to grapple, to grab, to make contact for consciousness transfer instead of disintegration. Clark felt the shift and understood immediately. This wasn't just Shigaraki anymore. Someone else was puppeting the villain, someone with centuries of combat experience and no moral hesitation. All for One, Clark realized. You're controlling him. And soon, the voice came from Shigaraki's mouth but wasn't his. I'll be controlling you. Shigaraki's hand shot forward, but this time it wasn't reaching for Clark's skin. It was reaching for his mind. The mental invasion hit like a spike through Clark's consciousness. All for One's quirk, one he'd stolen decades ago from a psychic villain, pierced the barriers between minds, seeking to overwrite Shigaraki's failing body with Superman's indestructible one. Consciousness transfer. The ultimate theft. But All for One had never encountered a Kryptonian mind. Clark's mental architecture was alien, built on different neurological principles, reinforced by solar energy that permeated every cell. The invasion that should have taken seconds instead crashed against walls of crystalline thought patterns that All for One couldn't map, couldn't navigate, couldn't comprehend. What is this? All for One's consciousness recoiled. This isn't human. This isn't even Quirk-enhanced. This is... Clark's willpower surged, so refined by years of resisting psychic attacks from foes like Maxwell Lord and Manchester Black. He grabbed Shigaraki's wrist, the physical anchor for the mental quirk, and squeezed. Not hard enough to break, hard enough to hurt. Get out of his head. The psychic connection snapped. All for One's consciousness slammed back into his own body in Tartarus, leaving Shigaraki gasping and disoriented in mid-air. The villain's eyes cleared, showing confusion and rage instead of ancient malice. "What did you..." Shigaraki started. Then decay erupted from his hands unconsciously, spreading in all directions as his control wavered. Clark didn't have a choice. He hit Shigaraki. One punch, calculated to Shigaraki's enhanced durability, delivered with just enough force to render unconscious without killing. The villain's body went limp. The decay wave stopped. Clark caught Shigaraki before he hit the ground, cradling the unconscious villain carefully. Around them, the battlefield had gone silent. Hundreds of heroes and dozens of villains stared at the flying man holding their apocalypse like a sleeping child. "He's neutralized," Clark announced, his voice carrying across the devastation. "Someone want to tell me where I should take him?" The response came not from heroes, but from the sky itself opening up. Portals, dozens of them, and through them poured the Paranormal Liberation Front, thousands of villains who'd been waiting for Shigaraki's signal to begin the war. "Oh," Clark said quietly. "That complicates things." The villain army saw their leader unconscious in enemy hands and attacked as one. Gigantification quirks, elemental manipulation, to technology-based assaults, everything launched simultaneously at the alien who dared to strike down their symbol of fear. Clark's heat vision carved precise lines through incoming attacks, destroying weapons without killing wielders. His freeze breath created ice walls that blocked elemental assaults. His speed let him dodge what he couldn't deflect, all while keeping one arm wrapped protectively around Shigaraki's unconscious form. "Protect the civilian," Endeavor roared, flames erupting as he charged into the fray. The number one hero's command shifted the battlefield's dynamics. This wasn't heroes versus villains anymore. This was everyone versus Superman, and the heroes were defending him. Mirko launched herself at a villain trying to flank Clark, her remaining arm delivering devastating strikes. So nobody touches the weird alien savior guy. Best Genist's fiber manipulation created barriers, protecting Clark's back. Edgeshot compressed himself into a needle strike, disabling villains' quirks with surgical precision. Even the students of UA, who should have been evacuating, dove into combat. Deku's Delaware smash shattered a villain's ice attack. Bakugo's explosions provided aerial suppression. Todoroki's ice created defensive walls, while his fire pushed back advancing forces. "This is insane," Bakugo shouted, blasting three villains simultaneously. "We're protecting some alien bastard we don't even know." "He saved civilians," Deku countered, using float to reach higher ground. "That makes him a hero, regulation or not." The battle raged, heroes and villains clashing in desperate combat. And at the center of it all stood Superman, holding the unconscious body of their would-be apocalypse, refusing to let go, refusing to abandon his responsibility. Anomu crashed toward him. High-end class, multiple quirks, engineered to kill, all might. Clark caught its fist, stopped its charge, and with his free hand, delivered an uppercut that sent the bioweapon into low orbit. The battlefield froze again. That casual display of strength, that effortless launching of a creature that had taken dozens of heroes to defeat. It recalibrated everyone's understanding of what they faced. "He's stronger than All Might," someone whispered. The words spread like wildfire. Stronger than All Might. Stronger than the symbol of peace. And he wasn't even registered, wasn't licensed, wasn't controlled by the Hero Commission. In the chaos, Hawks landed beside Clark, wings folded defensively. "You need to understand what you just did. You didn't just beat Shigaraki. You became the thing everyone will either worship or fear. Maybe both." "I don't want worship," Clark replied, still scanning for threats. "And I'm used to fear. What I need is somewhere secure to contain this villain and coordinates for evacuation zones." "You're really not going to fight for them?" Hawks gestured to the hero struggling against the villain horde. "You could end this battle in minutes with your power." "I could," Clark agreed. "But should I? These are your people, your society, your fight. I'm just someone who happened to be here." He met Hawks' eyes. "If I solve all your problems, what happens when I'm gone? When I find my way home?" Hawks stared at him, then laughed bitterly. "You sound like what All Might tried to be before he realized society couldn't function without him. That's the problem with symbols. Once people start depending on them, they can't stop." A massive explosion rocked the battlefield. Redestro, leader of the Meta Liberation Army, had entered the combat. His stress-powered enhancement swelled his body to grotesque proportions, each movement causing collateral devastation. "Where is Shigaraki?" Redestro bellowed. "Where is our Grand Commander?" "Unconscious," Clark called back, "and he's staying that way until this fighting stops." Redestro's eyes locked onto Superman. You're the anomaly, the foreign element, the one who disrupted our plan." His body swelled larger, stress building to catastrophic levels. "You've interfered with the liberation. That cannot stand." He charged, knocks each footfall creating craters. Clark shifted Shigaraki to his left arm, freeing his right. He didn't want to fight this man, didn't want to become the weapon these factions would use against each other. But Redestro wasn't giving him a choice. The villain's massive fist swung down with enough force to demolish buildings. Clark caught it on his palm, halting the strike completely. The shockwave from the stopped momentum shattered windows for blocks. "I said," Clark's voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. "The fighting stops." He pushed, gently by his standards. Redestro flew backward 300 yards, crashed through 2 buildings and didn't get up. The Paranormal Liberation Front wavered, their leader unconscious, their Grand Commander captured, and the alien who'd done both barely seemed winded. "Fall back," someone shouted. Portals opened again, villains retreating through them in organized chaos. Within 2 minutes, the battlefield had emptied of all but heroes and rubble. Clark stood in the center of devastation, still holding Shigaraki, surrounded by exhausted heroes who didn't know whether to thank him or arrest him. Endeavor approached, flames dimmed to embers. "The Hero Commission is on their way. They're going to want explanations. They're going to want control." He paused. "And they're going to want you." "They can have explanations," Clark replied, "but I don't belong to anyone." That attitude, All Might's voice came from behind them. The retired hero had arrived with Principal Nezu, both surveying the aftermath. "That absolute certainty in your own righteousness, I had it once too." All Might stepped closer, because his skeletal frame somehow still commanding respect. "Let me tell you what happened to me, young man. I became so powerful that society stopped trying to save itself. They waited for me to solve every problem, and when I couldn't anymore, when I retired, the entire structure collapsed. Crime rates tripled, villain attacks quadrupled. Hero society had become so dependent on one symbol that removing it nearly destroyed civilization." He gestured to the devastation around them. "You stopped Shigaraki in one punch, something dozens of our best heroes couldn't do. You defeated Ray Destro casually. You're making the same mistake I made, being so powerful that people will stop believing in themselves. Clark looked down at Shigaraki's unconscious face, saw a young man twisted by manipulation, groomed into apocalypse, never given a chance to be anything but a weapon. Then what should I have done? Clark asked quietly. Let him kill everyone. Let the decay spread. Stand aside and watch people die because helping them might make them dependent? No, Nizu interjected, his high-pitched voice cutting through the tension. But you should understand the context you've entered. This society built itself around All Might. When he fell, we barely survived the transition. If you become the next symbol, the next pillar everyone leans on, what happens when you leave? When you return to your Earth? Clark had no answer for that. A fleet of vehicles arrived. Hero Commission officials, Tartarus transport for Shigaraki, media crews documenting everything. And in the lead vehicle, the Commission president herself, as her expression calculating as she studied the alien who just reshuffled her carefully organized society. Mr. Kent, she called, approaching with a dozen armed heroes flanking her. We need to discuss your status, immediately. I'm not interested in status, Clark replied. I'm interested in making sure this villain is properly contained and these civilians are safe. That's not your decision to make, the president said firmly. Hero work requires licensing. You've now engaged in unlicensed combat, apprehended a major villain without authorization, and publicly operated without commission approval. That makes you, legally, a vigilante. Then your laws need to change, Clark said simply. The president's eyes narrowed. You don't get to dictate. I'm not dictating anything, Clark interrupted. And I'm just telling you that where I come from, helping people doesn't require permission from bureaucrats. If that makes me a criminal in your society, then arrest me. But you'll have to do it while I'm carrying the unconscious body of the villain who is about to destroy your civilization. The standoff lasted 10 seconds. Then the president smiled coldly. Tartarus has cells designed for individuals of your power class. We'll see how long your idealism lasts in isolation. No, Deku's voice rang out. The teenager stepped forward, one for all crackling around him, his eyes blazing with determination. He saved people. That makes him a hero, permission or not. Bakugo joined him, explosions popping. What Deku said, alien bastard or not, he fights like a hero. One by one, the students of Class 1A stepped forward. Then the heroes. Even Endeavor, flames reigniting, positioned himself between Superman and the Commission. Tartarus is for villains, Endeavor stated, not for those who save lives. The president looked around at the unified front, calculations running behind her eyes. She couldn't arrest Superman, not with every hero present defending him, not without starting a civil war in hero society. Fine, she said finally. Conditional freedom. UA takes responsibility for monitoring him. Any violation, any unsanctioned hero work, any... Agreed, Nezu interrupted smoothly. Mr. Kent will remain at UA as a visiting consultant, under my supervision. Clark wanted to argue, wanted to reject their authority entirely, but he was stuck in this world, didn't understand its rules, and had just made himself the center of a political firestorm. So he handed Shigaraki to the Tartarus transport team carefully. Keep him sedated, and away from All for One. That villain can possess him. Then he turned to the assembled heroes and students. Thank you for defending me. I'll try to earn that faith. As the Commission forces departed with their prize, as media drones captured every moment for broadcast, as Hero Society processed the arrival of someone who could be their salvation or their destruction, Superman stood among strangers who'd chosen to trust him. All Might approached once more. You reminded them of something they'd forgotten, that heroism isn't about permission, it's about choice. He extended his hand. Welcome to UA, Mr. Kent. Try not to break our world while you're here. Clark shook the offered hand, feeling the strength that remained in the retired symbol of peace. "So I'll do my best," he promised. "But I can't promise to play by rules I don't believe in." All Might smiled sadly. "Neither could I. That's what made me a symbol, and what nearly destroyed me." Somewhere in Tartarus, All for One smiled in his cell, already plotting. The alien was powerful, yes. Resistant to possession, certainly. But All for One had centuries of patience, and everyone eventually had a weakness. He just needed to find Superman's. Jaku City burned on every screen across Japan. The morning after Shigaraki's failed awakening, the media descended like vultures, broadcasting images of devastation on an unprecedented scale. Entire city blocks reduced to powder, casualty estimates climbing into the thousands, and at the center of every report, the mysterious flying figure who'd stopped the apocalypse with a single punch. Clark sat in UA's faculty lounge watching the coverage, his enhanced hearing picking up conversations from across the campus. Students debating what he was. Teachers arguing about the precedent he set. Commission officials demanding his immediate registration and control. "They're calling you the second coming of All Might," Aizawa said from the doorway, coffee cup in hand. The tired teacher looked even more exhausted than usual, found though half of them mean it as a compliment and half as a threat. "I'm neither," Clark replied, turning off the television. "I'm just someone who happened to be here when you needed help." That's exactly what All Might said. For 40 years. Aizawa slumped into a chair, then his body gave out. He retired, and society nearly collapsed because we'd forgotten how to function without him. Now you show up, more powerful than he ever was, and everyone's wondering if we're about to make the same mistake. Before Clark could respond, an alarm shrieked through the building. Red lights flashed. Nezu's voice came over the intercom. "All heroes to command center. Immediate threat." The command center displayed a live feed from Jaku City Hospital, or what remained of it. Heroes were gathering at the massive crater Shigaraki had created, and at its center, something was emerging from the rubble. Not something. Someone. Gigantomachia, the colossal beast loyal to All for One, had finally arrived. 25 meters tall, covered in rocky protrusions, carrying the remnants of the League of Villains on his back. Dabi, Toga, Spinner, Compress. They'd regrouped and were riding their monstrous ally straight toward Jaku's evacuation zones. "He's heading for the civilian shelters," Endeavor analyzed, his flames already igniting. "If he reaches them, how many heroes do we have in position?" Nezu asked. 43, Best Genist replied, but Gigantomachia is siege class. Last time he appeared, it took over 100 heroes to slow him down. We don't have those numbers. All eyes turned to Clark. "No," he said firmly, already knowing what they were thinking. "I'm not becoming your solution to every crisis. You have heroes. Use them." "They'll die," Mirko said bluntly. "That thing is a walking natural disaster. It took us 8 hours to stop him last time, and we had All Might equivalent firepower through coordinated quirk combinations. Without me, you'll have to be creative," Clark interrupted. "I didn't come to this world to replace your heroes. I came by accident, and I won't let my presence cripple your ability to protect yourselves." "Principle is admirable," Nezu observed, "but those civilians won't care about principle when they're being crushed." The words hit like a physical blow. Clark's fists clenched. This was the impossible situation. Help, and they'd never learn to stand on their own. Don't help, and people died. The same dilemma that had plagued him on his own Earth, magnified by being trapped in a society not his own. Deku stepped forward, green lightning crackling around him. "Then we combine forces. Mr. Kent doesn't solve our crisis. He assists. We lead. He supports. That way we learn. Civilians survive and I get to see how your heroes operate." Clark finished, understanding the compromise. "All right, but this is your fight. I'm just back up." 20 minutes later, Clark flew over the Jaku city crater alongside Japan's top heroes. Below, Gigantomachia crashed through buildings, each footfall registering on seismographs. The League of Villains perched on his shoulders directed him toward evacuation zones where thousands of displaced civilians huddled. Endeavor's strategy was sound. Pro-heroes would engage Gigantomachia head-on, using coordinated Quirk attacks to slow his advance. Students would focus on evacuating civilians from his path. Clark would intervene only if casualties became imminent. It lasted approximately 40 seconds before everything went wrong. Gigantomachia proved faster than anticipated, his multiple quirks synergizing in unexpected ways. Mount Lady's gigantification couldn't match his size. Kamui Wood's binding was shredded like tissue paper. Cementos's barriers crumbled under his charge. Then Dabi unleashed his blue flames, not at Gigantomachia, but at the evacuation shelter itself. "Surprise," the scarred villain announced, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Dad's watching. Might as well give him a show." The flames raced toward the building housing 300 civilians. Heroes moved to intercept, but they were too far, too slow, too human. Clark moved on instinct. Not heat vision carved through the flames, dispersing them before they reached the shelter. Freeze breath created an ice barrier around the building. Super speed evacuated everyone inside before the structure collapsed from thermal stress. 43 seconds. 300 lives saved. All eyes on Superman. "That's what I'm talking about." Dabi laughed, more flames erupting. "You're the alien, right? The one who knocked out Shigaraki. Let's see how you handle a Todoroki's fire." Blue flames intensified, hotter than anything Endeavor could produce. Heat that should have incinerated flesh, melted steel, reduced concrete to slag. Clark flew through it, his Kryptonian biology absorbing and dispersing the thermal energy harmlessly. He appeared in front of Dabi in less than a second, hand extended, not to strike, to disable, but his fingers moved with surgical precision, applying pressure to nerve clusters at Dabi's wrists. The villain's hands spasmed, flames cutting off instantly. Clark had learned the technique from Batman. Pressure points that temporarily paralyzed without permanent damage. "The flames stop," Clark said quietly. "Or I put you to sleep like I did Shigaraki." Dabi's scarred face twisted into something between rage and fascination. "You think you're a hero? You think saving them matters?" He gestured to the evacuees. "This society is rotten, built on lies, Endeavor's abuse, All Might's impossible standard, the Commission's control. You saving them just perpetuates." "I know societies can be flawed," Clark interrupted. "Mine is too, but burning civilians alive doesn't fix anything. It just makes you a murderer with a philosophy." "Says the alien playing hero in someone else's world," Dabi countered. "What gives you the right?" Gigantomachia's massive hand swatted Clark aside mid-conversation. The blow would have pulverized normal humans. Clark tumbled through 3 buildings before arresting his momentum, more surprised than injured. The colossal beast roared, and the sound carried, all for one's will. "The Master wants him. Bring the alien to Tartarus." Clark's X-ray vision caught Toga transforming into a civilian, using her quirk to infiltrate the evacuation group he'd just saved. Spinner was coordinating villain reinforcements through some kind of communication device. Compress had captured several heroes in his marbles, shrinking them for later interrogation. This wasn't just an attack, and it was a coordinated operation designed to capture him. All for One had learned from their mental confrontation. Couldn't possess Superman's mind. Fine, capture his body, study his biology, find weaknesses, and if that failed, at least remove him from the battlefield permanently. "Heroes," Endeavor's voice cut through the chaos. "Formation Delta 7, we protect the alien and evacuate civilians simultaneously." The response was immediate and professional. Best Genist's fibers created aerial pathways for civilian evacuation. Mirko and Edgeshot engaged Gigantomachia's legs, trying to topple the giant. Hawk's feathers became a communications network, coordinating dozens of heroes across the battlefield. They were good, skilled, brave, tactical, but they were fighting a siege weapon designed to crush armies and piloted by villains who knew their weaknesses, all while protecting civilians and a stranger they barely trusted. Clark made a decision. "Endeavor," he called, flying to the number one hero's side. "What do you need from me, specifically?" Endeavor's flames flickered with surprise, then determination. Gigantomachia has a weak point, base of his skull where multiple quirks intersect. But he's got regeneration and pain resistance. We need someone who can hit hard enough to reach his brainstem through layers of rock-like skin and bypass his healing factor. "I can do that," Clark confirmed. "But I need him stationary for 3 seconds." 3 seconds, Endeavor repeated. Then his expression hardened with respect. "We can give you 3 seconds." What followed was a masterclass in hero coordination. To Cementos created pillars that channeled Gigantomachia's movement. Mount Lady sacrificed her own body to slow his charge, accepting devastating injuries. Kamai Woods used every fiber to bind the giant's legs. And Endeavor, the number one hero, unleashed his ultimate technique. Prominence Burn. The flames concentrated into a beam of such intensity that it momentarily blinded observation drones. The attack didn't harm Gigantomachia significantly, but the heat and force made the beast pause, made him defensive for exactly 3 seconds. Clark didn't waste them. He accelerated to supersonic speed, building kinetic energy, calculating trajectory, adjusting for the giant's regeneration factor. His fist connected with the base of Gigantomachia's skull with exactly enough force, not to kill, but to shut down the neural pathways controlling the body. The giant collapsed like a demolished building, unconscious before hitting the ground. The League of Villains scattered from his back, landing in defensive positions. Dabi's flames reignited. Toga's transformation quirk activated. Spinner drew blades. Compress prepared his compression marbles. They were ready to fight to the death rather than be captured. But the heroes surrounded them, dozens of quirks ready, led by Endeavor's flames and supported by Superman's presence. It was overwhelming force, and even the League's fanaticism couldn't deny the math. "Stand down," Endeavor commanded. "You've lost. Shigaraki's captured. Gigantomachia's neutralized. This war is over before it started." "Is it?" Dabi's smile was manic. "You think this was the plan? So you think we didn't expect..." The sky opened up. Not portals this time. Something else. A massive warp quirk, unprecedented in scale, tearing reality across the entire battlefield, and through it, from Tartarus itself, came All for One. Not his body, that remained imprisoned, but his consciousness, his quirks, his malevolent will, all channeled through a warp connection he'd been building for months. "Hello, Superman." All for One's voice resonated from the dimensional tear. "I've been studying you through Shigaraki's eyes, your biology, your strength, your admirable moral code." The voice turned cold. "And I've decided, if I cannot possess you, I will destroy everything you've tried to save until you beg me to take you." Quirks erupted from the tear. Air manipulation that created Category 5 hurricane winds. Electricity that arced across the battlefield. Force multiplication that turned rubble into projectile weapons. All for One was demonstrating what centuries of stolen power could accomplish, and every attack was aimed at civilians. Clark moved faster than thought, his body becoming a blur of red and blue. He caught debris, dispersed electricity, created wind barriers with his own speed. Saved civilians by the dozens, by the hundreds, moving so fast that human eyes couldn't track him. But All for One had planned for this. Every civilian Clark saved, 2 more came under attack. Every fire he extinguished, 3 more ignited. The symbol of evil was proving a point. Superman couldn't be everywhere, couldn't save everyone, would eventually have to choose. You see, All for One's voice mocked. This is the burden All Might carried, the impossible responsibility of being the one everyone depends on. Save the North District or the South, the children or the elderly. Choose, Superman. Choose who dies. Clark's jaw tightened. His heat vision carved through attacks. His freeze breath contained fires. His speed pushed his Kryptonian biology to its limits in this universe's different physics. And still, it wasn't enough. A building collapsed to the east. He saved those civilians. But while he was there, flames consumed a shelter to the west. He couldn't be in 2 places at once, couldn't save everyone. The math of heroism was brutal and simple. Deku watched Superman struggle, saw the same determination and devastation that All Might must have felt during 40 years of carrying society's hope alone. "No," Deku said suddenly, One for All crackling to full power. "Oh, he doesn't have to choose, because he's not alone." The students of UA deployed as one. Not to fight All for One, they couldn't match that power, but to save civilians, to contain fires, to evacuate zones before attacks arrived. They couldn't move as fast as Superman, but they could multiply his effectiveness. The pro-heroes joined them. Endeavor's flames matched All for One's attacks. Best Genist's fibers created evacuation networks. Hawks' coordination ensured no area was left undefended. And in the center of it all, Superman finally understood what this society needed from him. Not to be their symbol, not to replace All Might, but to remind them what they could accomplish when they worked together, when they didn't wait for one person to solve every crisis. "All for One," Clark called, flying directly into the dimensional tear. "You want me? Come get me yourself. Stop hiding behind stolen quirks and face me directly." The tear pulsed with rage. "Arrogant. You think I fear you?" "I think," Clark replied, his heat vision intensifying, "you're too much of a coward to fight anyone who can't be defeated by your stolen power. I think you've been playing games with children because you know a real fight would end with you losing." The psychological warfare worked. All for One's ego, inflated by 2 centuries of dominance, couldn't tolerate the challenge. The tear widened, more of his consciousness flowing through, more quirks manifesting. And while All for One focused on Superman, the heroes saved everyone else. 20 minutes later, the battlefield was clear. All civilians evacuated, all fires contained. The League of Villains captured. Gigantomachia sedated and secured. All for One's consciousness retreated back to Tartarus, the dimensional tear sealing, his voice echoing one final promise. "This isn't over, alien. You've only made yourself my primary target." Clark floated above the devastation, breathing hard, not from exhaustion, but from the emotional weight of nearly failing, of almost not being enough. Endeavor flew up to meet him, supported by jetpack-equipped heroes. "You questioned whether you should help earlier. Asked if we'd become dependent on you." "And?" Clark asked. "And you're right to worry," Endeavor admitted. "But you're also wrong about something. You didn't save this city today. We did. Together. You just reminded us we could." Below, the students of UA were already coordinating rescue operations. Pro-heroes were establishing triage centers. Their civilians were helping civilians, quirks used not for combat, but for reconstruction. It was messy, imperfect, and absolutely human. "Welcome to Hero Society, Mr. Kent." Nezu's voice came through communication devices, where the wars never really end, the villains never really lose, and heroes must save the day despite impossible odds. A pause. "I think you'll fit in nicely, whether you want to or not." Clark looked across the city, using his telescopic vision to check every shelter, every hospital, every evacuation zone. Everyone was alive, injured, traumatized, but alive. Maybe Deku was right. Maybe this society didn't need another All Might. Maybe they just needed to remember they were all heroes. Tartarus Prison had never held a prisoner like Tomura Shigaraki. The maximum security facility, designed to contain society's most dangerous villains, had reinforced its protocols after Shigaraki's capture. Quirk suppressing restraints, constant sedation, isolation from all other prisoners, especially All for One. The Hero Commission had learned from past mistakes. They weren't giving the symbol of evil any opportunity to communicate with his successor. But what they didn't know was that All for One had spent 2 centuries learning to work around obstacles. 3 days after the Jaku city battle, Clark stood in Yue's observation room, watching live feeds from Shigaraki's cell. The young villain floated in a suspension tank, sedated, monitored, seemingly helpless. But Clark's super hearing caught something the electronic surveillance missed. A heartbeat synchronizing with another heartbeat somewhere else in the prison. All for One and Shigaraki, their bodies imprisoned separately, their consciousnesses slowly linking through Quirk connections too subtle for current technology to detect. "You're concerned," Aizawa observed, entering with his usual coffee. The tired teacher had been assigned as Clark's primary liaison, partly for his erasure quirk's ability to at least weaken Superman, mostly because Aizawa was one of the few heroes who didn't treat Clark like either a savior or a threat. "All for One is reaching him," Clark said, pointing to the displays. "I can hear it. Their heartbeats are matching rhythm. It's like they're becoming one organism across physical separation." Aizawa's eyes narrowed. The Commission's Quirk analysts said that was impossible. The suppression fields aren't designed for someone who's collected thousands of Quirks over 200 years, Clark interrupted. All for One is patient. He's been building this connection for months, maybe years, waiting for the right moment. The moment when there's an alien he can't possess but desperately wants to study, Aizawa finished grimly. He pulled out his communicator. "I need to report this to..." The alarms cut him off. Every screen in the observation room flared red. Shigaraki's suspension tank had cracked. Not from outside force. From inside. From the villain's own body releasing energy it shouldn't have possessed while sedated and restrained. Tartarus's emergency protocols activated. Reinforced barriers dropped. Additional restraints engaged. Guards in power loader suits rushed toward the cell. They didn't make it. Shigaraki's eyes opened. Not his own eyes. All for One's consciousness looking through them, possessing his successor's body remotely, using quirks that should have been suppressed. "Hello, Superman." The voice was Shigaraki's, but the intelligence was ancient. "Did you think I'd simply accept defeat? That I'd allow you to remain a variable in my carefully constructed plans?" The suspension tank shattered. Decay quirk, active despite all countermeasures, spreading from Shigaraki's feet across the floor. Guards tried to retreat. Too slow. The disintegration touched their boots, their legs, spreading upward before quirk-neutralizing foam could deploy. Clark moved on instinct. Burst through UA's walls. It flew the distance to Tartarus at speeds that turned the landscape into blur. He reached the prison in 4 seconds, crashed through reinforced barriers designed to contain all Might-class threats, and appeared in Shigaraki's cell, just as 3 guards finished disintegrating. "Too slow," All for One's voice mocked through Shigaraki. "You can't save everyone, alien, no matter how fast you move." Rage flared hot in Clark's chest. He'd been too slow. 3 people dead because he hadn't anticipated this, hadn't pushed the Commission hard enough to take his warning seriously. Shigaraki's hand shot forward, decay activated, aimed at Clark's face. Clark caught the wrist again, halting the attack, but this time was different. This time, All for One had prepared. The decay quirk pulsed, evolved. and pushed beyond its normal limits by all-for-one centuries of experience manipulating Quirk biology. It wasn't trying to disintegrate Clark's skin anymore. Couldn't. The Kryptonian cellular structure resisted that. Instead, it was trying to decay the space around him, the air, the very molecular bonds of reality. Clark felt it. Not pain, but pressure. His invulnerability meant nothing if the universe itself was unraveling at the quantum level. "There it is," All for One whispered through Shigaraki. "The tiniest crack in your perfection. You're not immune to physics, alien, just to this world's quirks. But decay isn't just a quirk anymore. I've evolved it, made it touch fundamental forces." The decay spread spherically, eating away at reality itself. Tartarus's reinforced walls crumbled. Support structures collapsed. And at the center, Sir Clark struggled against an attack that targeted existence rather than flesh. His heat vision flared, not to attack, but to contain. Thermal energy cauterizing the spreading decay, creating barriers of superheated air. His freeze breath followed, temperature differentials disrupting the quirk's molecular propagation. It was working. Barely. "Impressive," All for One acknowledged. "But you're alone, Superman. No heroes to coordinate with, no students to inspire. Just you versus me, using your body as a puppet. Let's see how long your physics-defying biology can withstand erasure of physics itself." Shigaraki's other hand grabbed Clark's shoulder. Both hands now, 10 fingers, full activation. The decay intensified, reality fraying faster than Clark could contain it. But All for One had made a miscalculation. Shigaraki's body, powerful as All for One had made it, wasn't designed for this level of quirk evolution. The fingers touching Clark began to crack, decay turning inward, consuming the vessel All for One was using. "No," the ancient villain hissed, feeling his puppet breaking. "No, this body was perfected, enhanced, ready for normal quirk usage." Clark interrupted, his voice strained but determined. "Not for whatever you're forcing it to do. You're destroying your own successor to get at me." The moment of doubt was all Clark needed. He released one of Shigaraki's wrists, trusting his Kryptonian durability, and struck. Not at Shigaraki, but at the floor beneath them. The impact cratered the cell, dropping them both 3 levels down, into Tartarus's quirk-dampening core where the suppression fields were strongest. The decay quirk flickered, weakened, All for One's consciousness losing its grip as the enhanced suppression interfered. Shigaraki's eyes cleared, showing confusion and pain. His own consciousness resurging, finding his body damaged, fingers bleeding, decay, quirk firing uncontrollably. "What?" Shigaraki's real voice, young and afraid. "What did he make me do?" Then he saw the disintegrated guards, the destroyed cell, Superman covered in the residue of molecular breakdown, and Tomura Shigaraki, for perhaps the first time in his manufactured life, felt genuine horror at what All for One had turned him into. "I didn't," he started. "I know," Clark said, carefully not approaching, not triggering the young villain's defensive instincts. "All for One was controlling you, using your body remotely. That's not... he wouldn't..." But even as Shigaraki protested, he knew the truth, and had always known on some level that All for One viewed him as a tool rather than a person, a successor to be used, not a student to be taught. "He's afraid of me," Clark continued, speaking softly despite the chaos erupting above them. "So afraid that he'd destroy you just to prove he can hurt me. That's not a mentor, that's a monster," Shigaraki finished bitterly. His decay quirk flared again, unconscious activation from emotional distress. "But that's what I am too. Look at me. I decay everything I touch. I was made to destroy. That's all I'll ever..." "You're wrong," a new voice interrupted. Deku dropped through the hole Clark had created, one for all, crackling around him in green lightning. Behind him came Bakugo, Todoroki, and a dozen other UA students, all having responded to the prison break alert. "You're Tomura Shigaraki," Deku said, and his voice carried absolute conviction. "You are Tenko Shimura, grandson of Nana Shimura, the 7th holder of One for All. You were a child who needed help, and All for One manipulated your tragedy to create a weapon." Shigaraki's eyes widened. "How do you?" "The vestiges told me," Deku replied, One for All's previous user's consciousness stirring within him. "Your grandmother, she wanted to save you. She died trying to protect people from All for One, and he used her death, used your family's destruction to turn you into this." Tears cut through the dust on Shigaraki's face. "She abandoned me, left me to become a hero while She left you to protect you," Deku countered. "All for One killed your family, arranged every tragedy, made you think heroic society abandoned you when really, he murdered everyone who could have saved you." The truth crashed over Shigaraki like a wave. Every memory recontextualized, every moment of abandonment revealed as manipulation. His entire identity built on lies. His decay quirk went wild, spreading in all directions, driven by emotional overload rather than conscious control. Clark moved to contain it, but Deku was faster. Black Whip! The dark tendrils of one of One for All's evolved quirks wrapped around Shigaraki, not to restrain, but to shield. The decay consumed the quirk constructs instead of spreading further, giving Deku time to reach the villain. "You can change," Deku said, his hand extended despite the danger. "You can choose to be different than what All for One made you. I know because I was quirkless. Everyone said I couldn't be a hero, and someone believed in me anyway." He nodded toward the hole above where All Might's silhouette appeared. "Let us believe in you." "I killed people," Shigaraki whispered. "Today, just now, I felt them disintegrate." "I know," Deku's voice cracked with empathy and pain. "And you'll have to carry that, face consequences, but that doesn't mean you can't also choose to save people tomorrow." Shigaraki stared at the extended hand, at the teenager offering redemption, at the alien who'd stopped him without killing him, at the possibility of being something other than All for One's weapon. His decay quirk fought against his control, decades of conditioning and trauma making the choice nearly impossible. Then he looked at his hands, saw his grandmother's eyes in Deku's expression, and remembered being a child who wanted to be a hero before All for One made him a monster. And Tomura Shigaraki, symbol of fear, destroyer of cities, made a choice. His decay quirk stopped, not suppressed, not overpowered, chosen to stop by the person wielding it. "I don't know if I can be saved," Shigaraki said quietly, "but I'm tired of being his puppet." The prison erupted with activity. Guards mobilizing, heroes responding, the Commission's forces converging on the catastrophic breach. But in the crater at Tartarus's core, something unprecedented occurred. A villain chose redemption, a hero offered forgiveness, and an alien from another world watched hero society face a question they'd never seriously considered. Could villains be saved or only defeated? Aizawa arrived, erasure active, ready to contain Shigaraki. But he paused, seeing the young villain's hands raised in surrender, seeing Deku's protective stance, seeing Clark nodding approval. "This is going to create a massive political nightmare," Aizawa muttered. "Good," Clark replied. "Your society needs to have that conversation." Above them, All for One screamed in rage from his cell. His perfect successor, his carefully groomed weapon, his contingency against Superman, all of it compromised by something he'd never anticipated. Hope. The one thing All for One in 2 centuries of evil had never learned to steal. The hero. Public Safety Commission's emergency session convened within hours of Shigaraki's surrender. Clark stood before a tribunal of bureaucrats, politicians, and high-ranking heroes, all demanding explanations for why an unregistered foreign entity had participated in containing a prison break, why a S-class villain was being offered redemption instead of execution, and why Hero Society's carefully maintained order was being challenged at every turn. The Commission President's expression could have frozen plasma. Mr. Kent, in the 72 hours since your arrival, you've engaged in unlicensed hero work, influenced a national crisis, compromised prison security, and now you're advocating for the rehabilitation of Tomura Shigaraki, a mass murderer responsible for thousands of deaths. I'm advocating, Clark corrected calmly, for giving a young man who was groomed into villainy from childhood a chance to make different choices. Isn't that what Hero Society should be about? Saving people, not just punishing them. Hero Society, the President replied coldly, is about maintaining order, public safety, and the rule of law, concepts you seem to have difficulty understanding. Hawks shifted uncomfortably in his seat at the tribunal's edge. As the Commission's former golden child, he'd seen the organization's darker pragmatism firsthand. But even he was unsettled by the barely concealed hostility toward Superman. With respect, Madame President, Hawks interjected, Superman has saved over 400 civilians in 3 days. He stopped Shigaraki's rampage, helped defeat Gigantomachia, and prevented All for One from executing a dimensional attack. Those aren't the actions of someone undermining Hero Society. They're the actions, the President countered, of someone operating outside our control. Someone who could become a greater threat than any villain if he decided our laws don't apply to him. She turned back to Clark. You refuse registration, refuse licensing, refuse to submit to Quirk analysis. For all we know, you're a villain from another dimension posing as a hero. If I wanted to harm your society, Clark replied evenly, would I have spent the last 3 days saving it? Perhaps you're establishing trust before a larger attack. Perhaps you're gathering intelligence. Perhaps. Endeavor interrupted, standing from his seat among the hero representatives. So we're so used to controlling heroes that we can't recognize one who operates from genuine altruism rather than commission approval. The room went silent. The number one hero publicly challenging the commission was unprecedented. Endeavor, the President's voice carried warning, you're dangerously close to insubordination. I'm dangerously close, Endeavor's flames ignited, to pointing out that Superman has accomplished more good in 3 days than some licensed heroes achieve in years, and we're treating him like a criminal because he won't bow to bureaucracy. Best Genist stood as well. I concur with Endeavor. The Commission's paranoia is preventing us from recognizing a potential asset. Asset? The President's laugh was bitter. Is that what All Might was? An asset? Look how well that worked when he retired. Society nearly collapsed. And now you want to create another symbol, another pillar for everyone to lean on. No one's trying to create a symbol. All Might's voice came from the back of the chamber. The retired hero stepped forward, skeletal frame somehow commanding respect. But we're also not going to punish someone for being powerful and choosing to help people. That's not justice, that's fear. The President's expression shifted, revealing the calculation beneath her anger. This isn't about fear, All Might. It's about precedent. If we allow Superman to operate without oversight, what message does that send? That power trumps law? That individuals can decide which rules apply to them? No. Nesu's voice cut through the tension. The super-intelligent principal had been silent until now, his sharp eyes processing the political chess game. It sends the message that heroism isn't defined by licenses and rankings, that saving lives matters more than institutional control. He smiled, showing too many teeth. Of course, if the Commission wants to publicly argue against that principle, they're welcome to explain it to the civilians Superman rescued. The political trap was obvious. The Commission couldn't condemn Superman without looking like they valued control over saving lives. But accepting him meant acknowledging limits to their authority. The President's jaw tightened. Proposal, then. Superman submits to limited analysis, not to steal his abilities, but to understand potential vulnerabilities should he be compromised by villains. In exchange, he receives provisional hero status, allowing legal operation under UA's supervision. No analysis, Clark said firmly. I won't let you weaponize my biology, but I'll accept provisional status if it means I can help people without causing political chaos every time. You're not in a position to negotiate. Actually, he is, a new voice interrupted. The chamber's doors opened, revealing dozens of civilians. The people Clark had saved from Jaku City, parents holding children he'd evacuated, heroes who'd fought alongside him, students from UA, and at the front, a woman with bandaged arms, one of the guards from Tartarus who'd survived the prison break because Clark had arrived in time to stabilize her condition. He saved my life, she said simply. When Shigaraki's decay hit me, I was dying. Superman used some kind of heat vision to cauterize the molecular breakdown. IEs then flew me to Recovery Girl faster than any ambulance. I'm alive because he didn't wait for authorization. One by one, people testified. Lives saved. Disasters averted. A society protected by someone who asked for nothing in return. The commission president watched her political position crumble. She couldn't fight this groundswell of public support. Couldn't be seen punishing a hero the people loved. Fine, she said finally. Provisional status. But the moment you step outside UA's jurisdiction, the moment you operate against commission directives, this agreement ends and you'll be classified as a vigilante threat. Understood, Clark replied, though his tone made clear he'd do what was right regardless of classifications. As the tribunal dispersed, Hawks caught up with Clark in the corridor. Yet you just backed the most powerful organization in Japan into a corner. They don't forget that. I didn't come here to make friends with bureaucrats, Clark said. I didn't come here intentionally. But now that I'm here, I'm going to help people. With or without permission. Hawks studied him for a long moment. You really believe that, don't you? That individual conscience matters more than societal structure. Don't you? Clark asked. You've been the commission's agent, done things you regret because they ordered it. When does following orders become participating in injustice? The question hit Hawks like a physical blow. Images flashed through his mind, missions he'd rather forget, compromises he'd made, the blood on his hands from killing twice because the commission deemed it necessary. I killed someone, Hawks said quietly. A villain named Twice. Good person, dangerous Quirk. The commission's analysis said he was too risky to leave alive during the war. So He couldn't finish. And you've carried that ever since, Clark observed gently. Every day, wondering if there was another way. If I could have saved him instead of... Hawks stopped, composing himself. The commission said it was necessary, that my feelings didn't matter compared to public safety. Your feelings always matter, Clark said. Taking a life should never be easy, should never be just following orders. The moment it becomes routine is the moment you've lost what makes you a hero. Is that what you do? Hawks asked. In your world, never kill no matter what. I try not to, Clark replied honestly. So because the moment I decide I have the right to determine who lives and dies, I become something other than a hero. I become a judge, jury, and executioner. And no one person should have that power, no matter how strong they are. Hawks absorbed this, comparing it to the Commission's utilitarian calculations, the necessary evils he'd been taught to accept. The Commission's going to test you, Hawks warned. They'll create situations where your principles conflict with their orders, where saving everyone isn't an option. And when you fail, when you can't live up to your own standards, they'll use it to prove you are never suited for hero society. Then I'll fail publicly, Clark said, and accept the consequences. But I won't compromise who I am to fit into their system. Elsewhere in the Commission headquarters, the president met with her inner circle. the handlers who actually ran hero society from the shadows. Superman is a problem, one advisor stated. He's inspiring too many people. Students questioning regulations, heroes challenging directives, civilians comparing him favorably to our ranked professionals. Worse, another added, he's making them question whether we need the commission at all. If a single alien can save more lives than our entire coordinated system, what's our purpose? The president considered this. Then we make him prove his worth. Create scenarios where his alien morality fails, where he has to choose who lives and dies. Show the public that infinite power without institutional control leads to catastrophic decisions. And if he succeeds, the first advisor asked. Then we neutralize him another way, the president replied coldly. All for One wants him. Perhaps we can arrange a trade. Superman's capture in exchange for intelligence on the remaining villain cells. Hawks, listening through a feather he'd left in the room, felt his blood run cold. The commission was planning to betray Superman to All for One. He had a choice to make. Loyalty to the organization that had raised him, or loyalty to the principles Superman represented. For the first time in his career as the Commission's perfect soldier, Hawks chose principle. He found Clark on UA's roof, looking up at the stars, different constellations than his home Earth, but stars nonetheless. They're planning to betray you, Hawks said without preamble. Set up scenarios to make you fail, and if that doesn't work, I'd trade you to All for One. Clark didn't seem surprised. I know, I heard the meeting. You, how? The room was soundproofed, Quirk shielded. Super hearing, Clark explained. I can hear conversations across cities if I focus. Your commission's secure facility might as well be transparent to me. Hawks processed this. And you're staying anyway, knowing they're plotting against you? Because leaving would mean abandoning people who need help, Clark replied. The commission's betrayal doesn't change what's right. You're insane, Hawks muttered. Admirably, terrifyingly insane. Or, Clark smiled slightly, I just have faith that there are more good people than bad in your society. People like you, making difficult choices. Heroes like Endeavor, learning to be better. Students like Deku, and believing villains can be redeemed. He turned to Hawks. The Commission doesn't represent hero society. They just control it. There's a difference. Hawks found himself believing, found the cynicism that had protected him for years cracking under Clark's absolute sincerity. What do you need from me? Hawks asked. Keep being a hero, Clark replied. Keep questioning orders that don't feel right. Keep hoping there's a better way, that's all. As Hawks left, he activated his communicator, not to the Commission, but to a private channel he'd been building. A network of heroes who'd noticed the organization's increasingly authoritarian bent. Endeavor, Mirko, Best Genist, even some students. A resistance forming inspired by an alien who believed heroism mattered more than hierarchy. In his cell at Tartarus, All for One smiled. The Commission's plan to trade Superman played perfectly into his own schemes. He'd let them think they were using him while he used them. Soon, he'd have the alien, have those Kryptonian cells to study, have the power to finally break free of this prison and this world's limitations. He just needed one more piece to fall into place. And in the depths of Tartarus, in a specially secured cell, Tomura Shigaraki sat with his hands carefully restrained, trying to decide if he believed in redemption or if All for One's programming ran too deep to escape. The war for Hero Society's soul had moved from battlefields to philosophy, and Superman had become the catalyst for a revolution he never intended to start. One for All reacted to Superman's presence before anyone understood why. Deku woke in UA's dormitory at 3 a.m., green lightning crackling uncontrollably around his body, the vestiges of previous One for All users manifesting visibly in his room. 7 translucent figures, each a hero who'd carried the Quirk before him, all staring toward the faculty building where Clark slept. "What's happening?" Deku gasped, trying to control the power surge. "Something unprecedented," the first user's vestige replied, his form more solid than it had ever appeared. "That alien, his energy signature is resonating with One for All, not like a Quirk user, like a fundamental force." The second user, usually silent, spoke. "All for One seeks to possess him. We can feel it through the connection to Shigaraki. If he succeeds, and if that demon claims the alien's power, it would be the end of everything," the third user finished grimly. Deku forced himself to stand, despite the energy overload. "Then we protect him. Warn him." "It's not that simple." All Might's vestige appeared. Toshinori, the eighth user, his spectral form, healthy and powerful. "All for One has been planning this since Superman's arrival. We've been sensing it through our connection to One for All's core. He's not just trying to steal Superman's power, he's trying to merge with it to become something beyond Quirk user or human." "Can he do that?" Deku asked. "We don't know," the seventh user, Nana Shimura, Shigaraki's grandmother, replied sadly. "But we know All for One has been preparing for a century to transcend his mortal limitations. Superman's alien biology might be exactly what he needs." Across campus, Clark stood at his window, staring at the green lightning emanating from Deku's room. His super hearing had caught the conversation, his X-ray vision showing the vestiges' manifestation. This world's power system was reacting to him in ways he didn't fully understand. One for All, a Quirk that accumulated strength across generations, somehow recognized his Kryptonian energy as similar but foreign. And All for One, the parasitic opposite, wanted to consume that similarity. Clark had faced body snatchers before, possessed heroes, mind-controlled armies. But this was different. All for One wasn't just powerful. He was patient, strategic, and had spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of stealing everything he wanted. A knock at his door. Nezu entered, so his intelligent eyes reflecting concern. "The students are frightened," the principal said. "One for All is reacting to you unconsciously. They think it means you're dangerous." "Maybe I am," Clark replied quietly. "Everything I do here has unintended consequences. I save people, the Commission feels threatened. I defeat Shigaraki, All for One becomes obsessed with possessing me. I try to help, and your world's power structures start breaking down." "Or," Nezu countered, climbing onto a chair to meet Clark's eye level, "you're revealing flaws that already existed. The Commission's authoritarianism, Hero Society's dependence on symbols, our failure to rehabilitate villains. You're not creating problems, Mr. Kent. You're making invisible problems visible. That doesn't help people who get hurt in the process." "No," Nezu agreed. "Yes, but it helps the next generation build something better, which is why." He pulled out a tablet showing surveillance footage. "You need to see this." The footage showed Tartarus's maximum security wing, All for One's cell, and around it, Quirk energy readings that shouldn't exist. The symbol of evil was doing something, building toward something. "Our analysts estimate he'll be ready to make his move in 48 hours, Nezu explained. "Whatever he's planning, it centers on acquiring you." "Then let him try," Clark said. "I've faced dictators, gods, and cosmic threats. I'm not afraid of All for One." "You should be," a new voice said. All Might entered, his skeletal form wrapped in a nighttime robe. Behind him, Deku and several Class 1A students who'd been awakened by the One for All surge. "All for One doesn't fight fair," All Might continued, moving to stand beside Nezu. "He doesn't match strength for strength. He finds what you love, what you value, and he destroys it. Then, when you're broken, he takes what he wants from you." "He tried to possess my mind," Clark countered. "Failed." "Because he was testing you," Deku interjected, green energy still crackling around his hands. "The vestiges are warning me." That attempt through Shigaraki was reconnaissance. Now he knows your mental structure, your resistance patterns. He's adapting. Adapting to what? Bakugo pushed forward, explosions popping in agitation. The alien's invincible. Even Shigaraki's decay barely scratched him. What's this ancient bastard going to do that we haven't already tried? He's going to target what Superman cares about, Todoroki observed quietly, his analytical mind processing the pattern. Not his body, his principles, his need to save people. The realization settled over the room like a weight. He's going to create a scenario where you have to choose, All Might said softly. Save civilians or stop his plan. Protect students or prevent his escape. Maintain your morality or watch people die. That's his specialty. Breaking heroes by making their virtues into weapons against them. Clark's jaw tightened. Then I'll save everyone and stop his plan. I'm fast enough. Strong enough. All Might thought that too, Nezu said gently. For 40 years, he tried to be everywhere, save everyone, be the perfect symbol. It nearly killed him. Now and you, Mr. Kent, for all your power, are still one person. Which is why, Deku stepped forward, one for all crackling with determination, you're not doing this alone. Young Midoriya, All Might started. No, Deku interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd inherited more than just a quirk. Mr. Kent keeps trying to handle everything himself because he doesn't want us to depend on him. But that's not how hero society works. We're strongest when we work together, when we combine our quirks, our strategies, our resolve. The vestiges within Deku stirred, and for a moment their forms became visible to everyone in the room, all the previous users of One for All, manifesting through Deku's enhanced connection. The boy's right, the first user's vestige said. All for One is powerful, but he's singular, selfish. He's never understood cooperation because he's only ever understood domination. We've fought him across generations, Nana Shimura's vestige added. And we've learned that his greatest weakness is his inability to comprehend people choosing to sacrifice for each other. He sees it as stupidity, not strength. Clark studied the vestiges. Heroes who'd fought across time, each giving their power to the next generation, none of them trying to carry the burden alone. You're saying I should trust you, Clark said. Trust that your society can handle this threat. We're saying, Bakugo growled, that you're not the only badass in this world. We've got quirks, training, and people who've been fighting this bastard a lot longer than 3 days. Despite the tension, Clark smiled. These kids, teenagers facing cosmic-level evil, had the same courage he'd seen in the Teen Titans in the Young Justice League. All right, he said. What's the plan? Nezu's smile widened. I'm so glad you asked. The next 48 hours transformed into a strategic operation that united UA, the pro-heroes, and even some commission members who'd grown uncomfortable with the president's betrayal plans. Hawks used his intelligence network to map All for One's quirk energy buildups, best genist-coordinated hero positions across potential target sites. Endeavor worked with Deku to understand how One for All's vestiges could counter All for One's possession attempts. And Clark, for the first time since arriving in this world, accepted a purely support role. No frontline combat, no solving everything with strength. Just a backup plan if everything else failed. It was harder than any fight he'd ever been in, watching heroes prepare for battle while he waited, trusting students to handle dangers that his powers could trivialize, accepting that his presence, as powerful as it was, could also be a crutch preventing others from growing. 36 hours into the countdown, the vestiges gave Deku a warning. It's starting, All Might's vestige said. All for One is making his move. But it's not what we expected. All for One wasn't trying to escape Tartarus. He was bringing the battle to UA. Every villain he'd ever granted quirks to, every subordinate still loyal, every corrupted hero he'd blackmailed over 2 centuries. They all activated simultaneously. Dozens of crisis points across Japan, fires in evacuation centers, hostage situations at hospitals, and villain attacks on schools, each crisis designed to pull heroes away from UA, to isolate Superman, to make him choose. Save civilians across Japan, or protect the students, All for One's real attack would target. The Hero Commission's communication network lit up with emergencies. The president's voice tight with barely controlled panic. All available heroes respond to crisis points. Priority Alpha, civilian protection. That's what he wants, Hawks warned on the secure channel. Spread us thin, leave UA vulnerable. But we can't ignore civilians dying, Endeavor countered. The debate raged for precious seconds. Then Clark made a decision that shocked everyone. "I'll handle the civilian rescues," he announced, "all of them simultaneously." "That's impossible," the commission president said. "Even you can't be in 50 places at once. Watch me." What followed defied every understanding of Quirk-based heroism. Clark became a red and blue blur, moving at speeds that made teleportation seem slow. He appeared at fire sites, extinguishing flames with freeze breath before anyone burned. Materialized at hostage situations, disarming villains before they could react. Rescued hundreds of civilians scattered across Japan in the time it took most heroes to respond to a single crisis. He wasn't showing off. He was proving a point, that he could handle the distractions, that the heroes could focus on the real threat, that they could trust him to do what he did best while they did what they did best. And at UA, where All for One's true attack manifested through a dimensional breach he'd been building for months, the heroes were ready. And the breach opened in the training grounds, and through it came not All for One's body, still imprisoned, but his consciousness, his stolen quirks, his malevolent will given form through thousands of quirks working in concert. A being of pure stolen power, targeting the students of Class 1A, with All for One's singular goal: possess Superman's body by using the students as hostages. But All for One hadn't counted on one thing. These students had been trained by the best, had faced villains since their first year, had been forged in combat against apocalyptic threats, and they'd been preparing for this fight their entire lives. Deku stepped forward, One for All blazing, backed by every vestige of heroism that had ever opposed All for One. "You've underestimated us," Deku said. Again. The battle for UA and for Superman's soul had begun. The clash between One for All and All for One shook UA's foundations. All for One's manifested consciousness, a being of pure quirk energy, accumulated power given terrible form, towered over the training grounds. Red eyes gleaming with 2 centuries of malice, body composed of every quirk he'd ever stolen, presence radiating the weight of ultimate evil. "Foolish children," All for One's voice resonated from the construct. "You think your training, your teamwork, your pathetic determination can match my perfection. I have stolen the powers of thousands, outlived generations, destroyed the greatest heroes your society ever produced." "Yeah," Bakugo snarled, explosions erupting around his palms. "But you've never fought us." Class 1A deployed in perfect formation, Oizawa's brutal training, constant villain encounters, and the desperation of knowing their world needed them had forged them into something unprecedented. Not individual heroes, but a unit. Todoroki's ice created barriers, while his fire provided offensive pressure. Bakugo's aerial bombardment combined with Uraraka's zero gravity to create 3-dimensional attack vectors. Ida's speed allowed him to rescue classmates from All for One's quirk attacks. Tokoyami's dark shadow, amplified by darkness Aizawa tactically created, became a force of nature. But it wasn't enough. All for One swatted aside their coordinated assault with contemptuous ease. A strength-multiplying quirk shattered Todoroki's ice. An air manipulation quirk dispersed Bakugo's explosions. A gravity quirk pinned Uraraka helplessly to the ground. Admirable, All for One acknowledged, but futile. I fought this battle for 200 years. I've adapted to every tactic, countered every quirk, broken every hero who dared oppose me. What makes you think? Deku's fist, wreathed in 100%, one for all power, struck All for One's construct directly in the face. The shockwave leveled 3 buildings. Because we're not fighting alone, Deku gasped, his arms smoking from the power output. The vestiges within him blazed visible, 7 previous users of One for All manifesting around him like guardian spirits. And we never will again. All for One's construct staggered, genuine surprise flickering across its features. How? The vestiges shouldn't be able to manifest outside your quirk. You don't understand One for All Might's vestige said, his form solidifying through Deku's connection. You never have. It's not just accumulated power, it's accumulated will, hope given form across generations. And we've all been waiting, Nana Shimura's vestige added, her expression fierce with grandmother's love and warrior's rage, for the chance to end you once and for all. The first user stepped forward, his vestige glowing with the original quirk. The ability to pass on power. You tried to dominate your brother, made him your first victim. But he resisted. Created One for All from your stolen power and his own will. Every generation since has been our answer to your tyranny. All for One's construct flickered with rage. Then I'll destroy that answer, break the chain, consume your vestiges along with the alien's power. He launched himself at Deku, hundreds of quirks activating simultaneously. Air cannons, strength multipliers, energy blasts, all spatial manipulation, every weapon in his arsenal deployed at once to annihilate the 9th user of One for All. And across Japan, Clark heard it. His super hearing already extended across the nation as he rescued civilians from All for One's distractions, caught the battle's escalation. Heard students screaming, buildings collapsing, the vestiges straining to protect Deku from power that eclipsed anything they'd faced before. Every instinct screamed at him to abandon the civilian rescues and fly to UA, to end this threat himself, to be the symbol, the solution, the savior who fixed everything. But he remembered Nezu's words. All Might's warning, the whole point of this strategy. If he always saved them, they'd never learn to save themselves. So Clark Kent, Superman, the most powerful being on this earth, made the hardest choice of his life. He trusted them, continued rescuing civilians while his hearing tracked his new friends fighting for their lives. Forced himself to believe in heroes who'd been training for this moment their entire lives. And at UA, the students proved worthy of that trust. Formation Delta Omega, Deku shouted, and Class 1A moved as one. Momo created support equipment in real time. Jiro's sound waves disrupted All for One's quirk coordination. Kaminari's electricity overloaded the construct's energy-based quirks. Kirishima, hardened to maximum, became an anchor point that All for One's strength quirks couldn't simply blow away. The pro-heroes joined the assault. Endeavor's prominence, Burn combined with Todoroki's flames, father and son fighting together for the first time. The best genist's fiber manipulation restricted the construct's movement. Mirko's devastating kicks targeted structural weaknesses the students created. Even Aizawa contributed, his erasure quirk flickering on and off, canceling individual quirks within All for One's construct for precious seconds that the students exploited brutally. But All for One was still adapting, still evolving. 2 centuries of stolen genius letting him counter every tactic, predict every strategy. He grabbed Deku, possession quirks activating, trying to overwrite the boy's consciousness and use him as a vessel to reach Superman. The vestiges screamed in defiance. No. 7 heroes across time merged their will, creating a barrier within Deku's mind that All for One's consciousness crashed against like waves on unbreakable stone. You cannot have him, the first user declared. You cannot have any of them. This generation will be the one that ends you. Then I'll kill them all. All for One's construct exploded with power, reality warping quirks activating, trying to tear apart the space around UA itself. The battlefield fractured. Students scattered as the ground opened into dimensional rifts. Buildings phased out of existence. The boundary between Tartarus and UA began to blur as All for One tried to pull his physical body through space to merge with his construct. If he succeeded, if his imprisoned form and his manifested consciousness combined with access to Superman's Kryptonian biology, the world would end. Clark felt the dimensional distortion even from across Japan, saw reality beginning to tear, heard Deku's desperate attempts to hold the line. Yang made his decision. He entrusted the remaining civilian rescues to Hawks and the local heroes, then flew toward UA at speeds that tore the sky open. 3 seconds. That's how long it took him to cross Japan. He arrived to chaos. Students bleeding, heroes struggling, reality itself coming apart at the seams as All for One's prison body began manifesting at UA through the dimensional breach. Finally, All for One's voice came from 2 sources simultaneously, the construct and his emerging physical form. The alien arrives just in time to watch everyone he cares about die unless he submits to my will. The classic villain trap. Surrender or watch others suffer. Clark had faced it 1,000 times. From Darkseid, from Brainiac, from Lex Luthor, and every time he'd found a third option. You're right, Clark said, hovering above the battlefield. I can't save everyone. Can't solve every problem. Can't be everywhere at once. All for One smiled. Then you admit, but I don't have to be, Clark continued, because I'm not alone. He looked down at the students of UA, at Deku, bleeding but unbroken, at Bakugo, exhausted but still fighting, at every young hero who'd refused to give up despite facing impossible odds. You've spent 2 centuries stealing power, Clark said to All for One, but you've never understood what real strength is. It's not the power you take, it's the power you give. He turned to Deku. I'm going to hit him with everything I've got. 1 strike, full power, no holding back, but he'll regenerate unless you finish it. Can you do that? Deku, broken arm smoking, face covered in blood, smiled with absolute determination. Plus ultra. Clark's eyes began to glow. Not just heat vision. Solar energy he'd been absorbing from this world's sun, stored in every Kryptonian cell, building for days. He'd been holding back, afraid of causing collateral damage, worried about becoming the solution everyone depended on. Not anymore. All for One, Clark's voice carried the weight of 2 worlds' worth of heroism. You wanted to see what I could do at full power. Here it is. The heat vision that erupted wasn't measured in temperature. It was measured in the fundamental forces of a yellow sun concentrated into 2 beams of absolute energy. All for One's construct and his emerging physical body tried to defend. Activated every defensive quirk he'd ever stolen. Barriers, reflections, absorption, phasing, everything in his arsenal deployed to survive. So the heat vision burned through them all. Burned through 2 centuries of stolen power like it was paper. Reduced the construct to atoms. Forced All for One's physical body back through the dimensional breach. But Clark was right. All for One's regeneration, Quirks would restore him, would let him try again. This was a temporary victory unless... United States of Smash! Deku's voice rang across the battlefield. The 9th user of One for All, channeling every vestige, every previous hero, every generation's accumulated hope, delivered one perfect punch. Not at all for one's body, at the dimensional breach itself. The shockwave collapsed reality back into proper configuration, sealed the tear between Tartarus and UA, trapped all for one's consciousness on one side, his body on the other, preventing them from ever merging, where the symbol of evil screamed in rage as his centuries-long plan shattered. And then the vestiges made their move. Through Deku, through the connection One for All had always maintained, with All for One's Quirk, 7 heroes who'd fought across time delivered their final blow. "This ends," the first user said. Now, One for All's power surged backward through the connection, not to steal. They'd never stoop to All for One's level, but to seal, to lock, to ensure that All for One's Quirk stealing ability could never function at full capacity again. It wasn't death. It wasn't even permanent victory. But it was enough. All for One's scream cut off as his power diminished by half, as his ability to steal quirks locked behind barriers only One for All could create. He remained dangerous, remained imprisoned, remained the symbol of evil. But he was diminished, contained, beatable. The battlefield fell silent. Students collapsed from exhaustion. Heroes stared in disbelief at what they'd accomplished. The dimensional breach closed completely, reality stabilizing. Clark landed beside Deku, who'd fallen to his knees, One for All's power fading back to baseline. "You did it," Clark said quietly. "We did it," Deku corrected, smiling through tears of exhaustion and relief. Together, like heroes should. Around them, Class 1A gathered. Bakugo offering a hand to pull Deku up. Todoroki checking on his classmates. Uraraka making sure everyone was accounted for. Ida already organizing first aid. They'd faced the greatest evil their world had ever known. And they'd won. Not through one person's strength, but through everyone's courage. All Might approached Clark, his skeletal form somehow standing taller. "You held back. Could have ended this instantly with that solar blast. But you waited. Let them fight. Let them prove themselves." "They didn't need to prove anything to me," Clark replied. "They needed to prove it to themselves." Endeavor joined them, flames dimmed, expression contemplative. "You're not going to become our next symbol, are you?" "No," Clark confirmed, "because you don't need another symbol. You need what you have. Heroes who support each other. Students who believe in something bigger than themselves. A society learning that heroism isn't about one person shouldering every burden." "The Commission won't like that answer," Hawks observed, landing beside them. "The Commission," Nezu's voice came through communicators, "is about to have larger concerns. On every screen across Japan, footage played, not of the battle, though that was being broadcast too, but of the Commission President's secret meeting, her plan to betray Superman to All for One, her willingness to sacrifice the alien who'd saved thousands of civilians for political control. Hawks had recorded everything, and now it was public. "Looks like," Hawks said with grim satisfaction, "Hero Society's about to have a reckoning about who actually serves the people versus who serves power." Clark looked across the devastated training ground, at students helping each other to the medical wing, at heroes coordinating cleanup, at a society that had just proven it could save itself. "I should probably leave," Clark said quietly, "before I become part of your political revolution." "That's not my fight." "Except," All Might countered, "you can't leave, not until we find a way to send you home. Which means you're stuck in our political revolution whether you want to be or not." Clark couldn't help but smile. "Then I guess I'd better make sure it ends with actual heroes in charge instead of bureaucrats." In the ruins of the battlefield, as medics treated the wounded and news drones captured everything, Superman and the heroes of UA stood together, not as symbol and followers, not as alien savior and grateful recipients, but as allies, as friends, as heroes who'd faced apocalypse and chosen to win together. The war for Japan wasn't over. All for One remained a threat. The Commission's corruption ran deep. Society would have to rebuild its understanding of heroism from the ground up. But for the first time since All Might's retirement, Hero Society had a hope that didn't depend on one person. They had each other. And that, Clark reflected, was the most powerful thing in any universe. 6 weeks after the battle that nearly broke reality, Clark Kent stood in UA's redesigned training ground, watching Class 1A practice coordinated combat maneuvers. They'd grown, not just in power, though Deku's control over One for All had improved dramatically, but in confidence, in understanding that heroism was a team effort, not individual glory. "Left flank, Bakugo," Deku called, and the explosive hero adjusted immediately, no argument about following someone else's lead. Todoroki's ice and Momo's created equipment combined seamlessly. Uraraka and Ida executed a maneuver they'd clearly practiced dozens of times. Even Manita was contributing strategically rather than just being a liability. "They don't need you anymore," Aizawa observed, appearing beside Clark with his ever-present coffee. "If they ever really did." "They never needed me," Clark corrected. "They needed to believe in themselves. I was just catalyst." "Some catalyst," Aizawa replied dryly. "You dismantled the Hero Commission's leadership, inspired a complete restructuring of Hero Society, and convinced a generation that symbols are traps rather than goals. All in 6 weeks. The aftermath had been chaotic. The Commission President's betrayal exposed, a dozen high-ranking officials arrested for corruption, Hawks leading a reform movement that was slowly, painfully reshaping how heroes operated. No more children kidnapped for Spartan programs. No more rankings that prioritized publicity over actual heroism. No more treating heroes as government weapons rather than public servants. It was messy, imperfect. Some heroes resisted the changes, and some civilians demanded the comfort of clear hierarchies. But it was progress. "The portal's almost ready," Nezu announced, approaching with a tablet displaying complex equations. Support Department and Melissa Shield from I-Island collaborated on a dimensional breach generator, reverse-engineered from All for One's attack pattern. Should be able to send you home within the week. Clark felt a complex mixture of relief and regret. Relief at returning to his Earth, his metropolis, his Lois. Regret at leaving people who'd become genuinely important to him. "What will you do?" Clark asked. "When I'm gone? Without an alien to unite against or inspire?" "Continue the work you started," a new voice said. Toshinori Yagi, All Might in his skeletal form, approached with several members of the reformed Hero Commission board, and not the authoritarian controllers of before, but actual heroes elected by their peers. Hawks, Best Genist, Ryukyu, even Endeavor, learning to lead through service rather than domination. "You showed us," All Might continued, "that Hero Society had become diseased. We worshipped symbols instead of cultivating heroism. We controlled heroes instead of empowering them. We forgot that the point was saving people, not maintaining institutional power." "And now," Hawks added, his wings folding comfortably, "we're trying to build something better, messier, more democratic, less dependent on any single pillar." "It won't be easy," Best Genist warned. "Society wants simple answers. Clear leaders. The comfort of knowing someone infinitely powerful will save them." "But that comfort," Endeavor growled, his flames dimmed to embers, "is a trap. The one I fell into as number 2 hero, always chasing All Might's shadow. One we can't let the next generation inherit." Clark nodded, seeing the understanding in their eyes. They'd learned the lesson he'd tried to teach, that true heroism was empowering others, not being worshipped by them. "What about Shigaraki?" Clark asked. The young villain had been a constant concern since his surrender. Rehabilitation facility, Nezu explained. Heavily monitored, but focused on therapy and understanding rather than pure punishment. Your conversation with him, about being groomed versus choosing your path, started something. He's trying. Trying to kill us or trying to change? Bakugo called from the training ground, having clearly been listening. Both, Deku answered, helping a fallen classmate up. No, but mostly trying to figure out who he is without All for One's voice in his head. That's more than anyone expected. The training session ended. Students gathered around, and Clark realized they'd timed their break for this conversation. "So you're really leaving?" Uraraka asked, her usual cheerfulness subdued. "Have to," Clark replied. "I don't belong to this world. I have people back home who need me, who probably think I'm dead." "Will you tell them?" Ida inquired. "About us? About this world?" "I'll tell them," Clark confirmed, "that I found a universe full of heroes who just needed to remember what heroism meant, who saved themselves when they could have waited for someone else to do it." "That's sappy as hell," Bakugo muttered, but his expression was conflicted. "You're still a decent fighter." For an alien." High praise from Bakugo. Todoroki stepped forward, his mismatched eyes serious. "You helped me understand something about my father, about power and responsibility." He glanced at Endeavor, who stood at a distance with the Reformed Commission. "Not that it excuses anything, but people can change, if they choose to." "Everyone can change," Clark agreed. "The question is whether they want to." Over the following days, Clark said his goodbyes, helped the support department finalize the portal technology, worked with Melissa Shield, a brilliant young inventor from I-Island, to ensure the dimensional math was accurate. And on his final night, he found himself on UA's roof with unexpected company. All for One's voice came through a communication device, broadcast from Tartarus. The symbol of evil, diminished but unbroken, had requested one final conversation. "Alien," All for One's voice was contemplative rather than threatening. "You defeated me, not through power, though yours is considerable, but through philosophy. You convinced them that collective heroism mattered more than individual dominance." "Is there a point to this?" Clark asked warily. "The point," All for One replied, "is that you've won this battle, but not the war. I am immortal, patient. This setback is temporary, and when you leave, when your influence fades, society will revert. They always do. Humans are too weak, too fearful, too desperate for symbols to truly embrace your collective heroism." "Maybe," Clark acknowledged, "but that's their choice to make, their society to build. I can't force them to be better any more than you could force them to submit." "Can't you?" All for One's voice carried dark amusement. "You're powerful enough to reshape this world however you want, to become God King, to enforce your vision of heroism. Why don't you?" "Because," Clark said simply, "that would make me you." The silence that followed was telling. "I almost pity you," All for One finally said. "All that power, bound by such limiting morality. You could have been magnificent." "I am magnificent," Clark countered. "Not because of what I can do, but because of what I choose not to do. That's the difference between us. You use power. I serve with it." "We'll see," All for One replied. "How long your lessons last after you're gone. How long before they're desperate enough to want another symbol, another All Might. Owns another." Clark cut the transmission. Deku had been listening from the shadows. "He's probably right, you know. People will want another symbol, will try to make me into All Might 2.0. "And?" Clark asked. "And I'll refuse," Deku said firmly. "Because you taught me that being the symbol of peace killed All Might, literally burned him out from the inside. I want to be a hero who inspires others, not one who makes them dependent." "Then you've learned everything I could teach you," Clark replied. The next morning, the portal opened in UA's courtyard. A swirling breach in reality, mathematics and support equipment forcing open a path between dimensions. The entire school gathered. Students, teachers, heroes, even some reformed commission officials. They weren't here to worship or mourn, just to say goodbye to someone who'd become a friend. Hawks handed Clark a small device. Emergency beacon. If you ever need help from this dimension, if your world faces something you can't handle alone, activate it. We'll find a way through. And if your world needs me, Clark asked, then we'll handle it ourselves, Endeavor replied. Like you taught us. All Might stepped forward, offering his hand. Thank you for reminding me that my greatest legacy wasn't my power or my symbol. It was inspiring the next generation to be better than I was. They shook, two symbols from different worlds, understanding each other perfectly. Deku approached last, one for all, crackling gently around him. I have a message from the vestiges. They wanted me to tell you. He paused, connecting with the previous users. That heroism crosses all barriers, all dimensions. That whether you're human or alien, quirked or quirkless, what matters is the choice to protect others. Tell them, Clark replied, that they're heroes who'll be remembered long after I'm forgotten. He turned to the portal, then back to the assembled crowd. Students who'd grown into their potential. Heroes learning to serve rather than rule. A society choosing the hard path of collective heroism over the easy comfort of symbols. You don't need me, Clark said. You never did. You just needed to remember that hero society's strength isn't in one person's power. It's in everyone's courage. He stepped toward the portal, then heard a voice call out, "Hey, alien!" Bakugo, standing with Class 1A, his expression fierce. You better not get soft in your world. No coasting just because they don't have quirks. Keep pushing yourself. They keep being the kind of hero who'd make us look bad. Clark laughed. I'll do my best. He entered the portal. Reality twisted, dimensions folded, physics bent in ways that even Kryptonian biology found disorienting. For a moment, he existed between worlds, seeing both Earths simultaneously. In the My Hero Academia world, students waving goodbye, teachers nodding respect, a society beginning the long work of rebuilding itself without symbols, All Might smiling sadly at the departure of someone who understood his burden. In his home world, Lois Lane searching frantically, the Justice League mobilized, Metropolis in chaos, because Superman had vanished mid-battle 6 weeks ago, and then the portal sealed. Clark emerged in his Metropolis, above his city, under his yellow sun. His powers surged back to 100%, and the slight diminishment from MHA's different physics evaporating. Superman. Lois's voice through his super hearing, relief and anger and love all mixed together. He had explaining to do, questions to answer, a fight with Lex Luthor to finish that had been interrupted 6 weeks ago. But as he flew toward his daily planet, as he prepared to reassure his world that he was back, Clark carried something from the other Earth. The understanding that even he, Superman, the Man of Steel, the last son of Krypton, was strongest when he wasn't alone. That heroism was about empowering others, not being worshipped by them. And in the My Hero Academia world, in UA's common room, Deku stood with his classmates watching news coverage of their society's reconstruction. Think he's okay? Uraraka asked. Back in his world? He's Superman, Todoroki replied. So he's probably already saved 17 people and stopped a villain. Yeah, Deku agreed, smiling. But more importantly, he remembered what it means to trust others. That's what makes him a real hero. On the television, a news anchor discussed the Reformed Hero Commission, the new cooperative hero networks, the shift away from rankings and symbols toward actual public service. It was messy, imperfect. Some people resisted. Some heroes struggled with the changes. But it was better. And in Tartarus, All for One sat in his diminished state, plotting long-term schemes that would take decades to mature. The alien was gone, but the symbol of evil was patient. He could wait for society to revert, for people to crave symbols again, for the next opportunity to seize power. But what he didn't understand, what 2 centuries of evil had never taught him, was that Clark hadn't left inspiration behind. He'd left vaccination, an entire generation of heroes who understood that dependence on symbols was a trap, that collective heroism mattered more than individual dominance, that the strength to save themselves was always within them. All for One could plot forever. But he was facing something unprecedented, a society that had learned to save itself. And that, Tomura Shigaraki thought from his rehabilitation facility, might be the only thing strong enough to finally break the cycle of symbols and evil that had defined hero society for generations. He looked at his hands, carefully restrained, constantly monitored, still capable of decay, still dangerous, but also capable of choice. And for the first time in his manufactured life, Tomura Shigaraki chose to believe in redemption. And across dimensions, though they'd never know it, an alien and a villain both proved that change was possible. That people could choose to be better than their programming. That heroism, ultimately, was about the choices you made, not the power you were given. 6 months later, in both worlds, the effects of that brief dimensional collision continued to ripple outward. In Metropolis, Superman worked with the Justice League differently, delegated more, trusted more, remembered the lesson Class 1A had taught him, that even he was strongest when he wasn't alone. In Japan, Hero Society continued its painful evolution. The Reformed Commission, led by heroes rather than bureaucrats. The next generation raised without symbol worship, and with society learning that saving itself was possible. And sometimes, late at night, when Deku stood on UA's roof looking at stars, he wondered if somewhere out there, Superman was looking back. 2 heroes from different worlds, connected by the understanding that true strength was never about standing alone. It was about making sure no one else had to. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.